Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Netanyahu orders powerful attacks on Gaza. So starting off with some bad news here, that there's heavy Israeli bombardment happening in Gaza again. And it started after Netanyahu put out a statement saying that he ordered the military to immediately carry out forceful strikes in the Gaza Strip. Israel is claiming that its forces in Rafah came under attack by Hamas fighters, and Palestinians on the ground reported hearing gunfire and strikes in the south, but Hamas has said that it had no relation to the shooting incident in Rafah and reaffirmed its commitment to the ceasefire agreement. And according to the reports, Netanyahu has decided to take more territory in Gaza. So Israel currently controls 58% of Gaza's territory, and apparently he's ordered the military to take more, to go further, to move that so-called yellow line further west. And after Netanyahu's announcement, there's a series of Israeli airstrikes in Gaza City, Khan Yunis, and then later in central Gaza. According to the civil defense in Gaza, at least 30 people have been killed. And the pictures and videos coming out of Gaza are absolutely horrific. Many children among the dead and wounded, seeing people collapsed under the rubble, people trying to get them out. It's just absolutely horrific. That, we're back to seeing the same atrocities happening in Gaza. And as far as I understand right now, I'm recording this, it's about 10:30 p.m. here in the U.S. on the East Coast. And it appears that the attacks continue. And these are very heavy attacks. And so just to give you the timeline here. So according to Israeli media, on Tuesday, Israel accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire deal over some things with the bodies of the deceased Israeli hostages. They claim that on Monday, the body that Hamas released was partial remains of an IDF soldier who was killed on October 7th. And it's kind of confusing, but Israel says that they recovered his body back in 2023. But these, I guess, are additional remains that they didn't recover. So because of that, they accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire. They also released a video, drone footage, that they say shows Hamas bringing a body into an area, burying it, and then getting the Red Cross to dig it up, saying that they were staging finding the body. But according to Israeli media, Israel brought this to the U.S. and said, oh, this is a ceasefire violation. We're going to launch airstrikes. And the U.S. objected. And then this alleged attack happened. And now I've seen on Twitter, on social media, Israeli accounts saying that an Israeli soldier was killed, did die in Rafah. But I have not seen that confirmed by the big Israeli media outlets, or so not clear if an IDF soldier was killed. But either way, they're clearly using this incident, whatever exactly happened, to just blow up the ceasefire and just slaughtering people across Gaza again. So what has the U.S. response been here? The comments from Vice President J.D. Vance was he claimed that the ceasefire is holding, that this is just a little skirmish, these heavy Israeli airstrikes. He said, quote, "The ceasefire is holding. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be little skirmishes. We know that Hamas or somebody else within Gaza attacked an IDF soldier. We expect the Israelis are going to respond, but I think the president's peace is going to hold," end quote. So notice what Vance said there is that we know that Hamas or somebody else attacked an IDF soldier. So he's not confirming that the U.S. thinks it was Hamas that was behind this incident. And then I actually just saw right before I started recording. So President Trump is in Asia right now. I believe he might be maybe he's arrived in South Korea. But so he was sleeping when all this started. And I do wonder if that was part of, Netanyahu's strategy here to try to, launch the airstrikes while Trump was traveling in Asia or asleep or something. But so he was asked about, everything that's gone down. And according to the Times of Israel, he told reporters that nothing will jeopardize the ceasefire in Gaza. But he added that Israel should hit back if its soldiers were killed. He said, quote, "They killed an Israeli soldier, so the Israelis hit back, and they should hit back," end quote. So he's saying that they killed an Israeli soldier. Again, I haven't seen that. Even the Times of Israel, Haaretz, the major, English language Israeli media outlets, I've not seen any confirmation that an IDF soldier was killed so far. But here's Trump is backing these major airstrikes in response. How can you justify the scale of violence that Israel has inflicted in response to whatever happened in Rafah? But Trump is backing it. All right, so the next one here, Israel prepares propaganda war for when journalists enter Gaza. So Israeli officials are preparing for a propaganda war for when international journalists enter the Gaza Strip, the Israeli news site Ynet has reported. So far, Israel has barred the entry of foreign journalists into Gaza, and it has killed more than 200 Palestinian journalists inside the Strip. But the Ynet report said that the possibility of an international force entering Gaza could also come with international reporters, and that Israeli and foreign journalists will soon be able to enter the Strip under IDF escort. Israeli officials are worried about a wave of human stories about the civilians suffering in Gaza, since, of course, they will portray Israel's military campaign in a negative light. So they're worried about reporters going in there and speaking to Palestinians, speaking to people who have survived this. And one plan that Israeli officials are discussing is an attempt to shift the blame for the IDF's destruction of Gaza to Hamas by setting up demonstration sites where journalists can be brought in for controlled visits. So one Israeli official said, quote, "We are working to prepare explanatory materials with an emphasis on visual and incriminating evidence to illustrate that Hamas turned Gaza into a terror state, cynically using civilians and civilian infrastructure," end quote. There's another quote here that I thought was interesting from an Israeli official, basically acknowledging that there's not much that they can do once the journalists get in. And I think this is why they have not allowed that to happen yet. This official said, quote, "Unfortunately, I don't see real readiness. The international media have already published photos of the destruction and the death toll figures released by Hamas's health ministry, what hasn't yet been told are the human stories from Gaza in the voices and faces of the residents themselves. That's what journalists will now bring, and there's little we can do to counter it. During the war, we could say, return the hostages and we'll end the war. Now the hostages have returned and the war is over. This is the aftershock, like a tsunami. We just have to lower our heads, let the wave pass, and move on," end quote. And obviously, there's been plenty of ways to find the human story happening in Gaza, which is why so many people have turned against Israel over the past 2 years, because they've seen what's happening on the ground through social media and from Palestinian journalists. And another thing is that they're trying to challenge the death toll numbers, though, as we've discussed a lot on this show, that the studies show that that the Gaza Health Ministry death toll is likely an undercount. And that is always the term that they use for the health ministry, is the Hamas-controlled health ministry. But the people in charge of the health ministry are doctors and they do meticulous work. And if people want more information on that, if you're a new listener or something, I interviewed a guy named Matthew Cockerill, who's a historian and who's a researcher who's taken a real close look at the Gaza Health Ministry numbers and the death toll there. And what he has found is that the scale, the percentage of women and children killed is unprecedented for a modern conflict. He said you have to go back to Rwanda to find something close, which the scale in Rwanda was worse, but you have to go back to Rwanda to find something comparable. All right, so the next one here, Israel encouraged Qatar to send money that funded Hamas. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So a newly released memo from the Israeli government shows that Tel Aviv pressed Qatar to send money to Gaza, knowing the funds would benefit Hamas. The document adds to the pile of evidence that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu propped up Hamas for years before the October 7th, 2023 attack. Khan News journalist Suleiman Maswadeh reported obtaining a 2020 memo that pushed Qatar to continue sending financial support to Gaza, knowing that the funds would reach Hamas. And this is something when Netanyahu was trying to justify his airstrikes on Qatar, one of the things he said was, they fund Hamas. They've sent money to Hamas, when he was literally the person facilitating that. So this is what the journalist said, quote, Israel's begging documents to Qatar requesting to continue transferring money to the Gaza Strip, even though there were indications that part of it was leaking to Hamas. The Qataris, in return for the money, sent actual invoices to Israel. In short, everything is documented, end quote. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. bombs 4 drug boats in the Eastern Pacific. So the U.S. military bombed a total of 4 alleged drug boats in the Eastern Pacific Ocean on Monday, U.S. War Secretary Pete Hegseth has announced. So this series of attacks marks the first time that the U.S. has bombed multiple boats in one day, and it brings the total number of vessels the U.S. has struck since the campaign started on September 2nd to 14, including 8 that were hit in the Caribbean and at least 6 that were hit in the Eastern Pacific. As usual, Hegseth offered no evidence to back up the claim that the boats were carrying drugs and provided no information about the people who were killed, whom he labeled narco-terrorists, which is essentially a term that they're using to justify killing these people and conducting these extrajudicial executions. Hegseth said that 14 narco-terrorists were killed, bringing the total number of executions at sea to 57, according to numbers released by the administration. Hegseth also said that 1 person survived the strike and that Mexican authorities accepted responsibility for rescuing the survivor. So that suggests that the strikes were near Mexico. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed that Mexico had rescued 1 person, and the Mexican Navy said that it was conducting search and rescue operations about 400 miles southwest of the Mexican city of Acapulco. Sheinbaum has previously criticized the U.S. bombing campaign for targeting boats in the region, saying that she does not agree with the policy. So this is what the Mexican president said last week. She said, quote, there are international laws on how to operate when dealing with the alleged illegal transport of drugs or guns on international water, and we have expressed this to the government of the United States and publicly, end quote. So in his announcement, as he's been doing lately, Hegseth, made clear that the bombing campaign will continue, and he drew parallels to the war on terror. He said, quote, the department has spent over 2 decades defending other homelands. Now we're defending our own. These narco-terrorists have killed more Americans than Al-Qaeda, and they will be treated the same. We will track them, we will network them, and then we will hunt and kill them, end quote. The U.S. military has also continued its campaign in the Caribbean aimed at toppling Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. On Monday, the U.S. conducted its 3rd bomber flight near Venezuela's coast, and they're sending an aircraft carrier to the region. Certainly don't need that to target small, defenseless boats that they've been blown out of the water. All right, so the next one here. U.S. officials involved in Latin America campaign must sign NDAs. So U.S. military officials involved in the Trump administration's military campaign in Latin America have been asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, Reuters reported on Tuesday, citing U.S. officials. The report said that the request is highly unusual since U.S. military officials are already required to keep secrets from the public, though it is also acknowledged that the Pentagon has previously used NDAs under the leadership of War Secretary Pete Hegseth. But this does fit in with what we're seeing with this military campaign, which is a total lack of transparency. Members of Congress have complained that they've been offered no evidence, no information about these people that the U.S. is bombing. And of course, they didn't go to Congress for an authorization or a declaration of war. And so in an interview on Sunday, Senator Rand Paul, who has been very critical of the bombing campaign, affirmed that Congress has not received any information about the people. And this Reuters report comes after Admiral Alvin Holsey, the head of U.S. Southern Command, who has overseen the military operations in the Caribbean, is stepping down just 1 year into his command, which is another highly unusual move. And there's reporting that he raised concerns about this campaign, about these U.S. strikes on these boats. So obviously there are signs that internally there are people who are not comfortable with these executions. All right, so the next one here, U.S. federal agent attempted to recruit Maduro's pilot. So this is a report from the AP, and it is about a U.S. federal agent who attempted to recruit Nicolas Maduro's pilot. So while his planes, he had 2 planes that were in the Dominican Republic for service, and the U.S. actually ended up seizing them under the guise of sanctions enforcement. But one of those pilots, actually a few of them were contacted by U.S. federal agents, and this one particular pilot was targeted by a certain federal agent. And this is going back to the Biden administration. And the idea was he was trying to get him to fly Maduro somewhere and then land him somewhere where the U.S. could arrest him or kidnap him. So, and this gets into the details here. And it's kind of an interesting report if you want to check it out here. But it goes to show that kind of this effort, they really did just ramp things up. But, it's not like Biden maybe very slightly eased some of the sanctions, some of the oil sanctions on Venezuela, but essentially continued the policy of the previous Trump administration. And this federal agent who was trying to flip Maduro's pilot continued the effort even after he retired. He was texting him. And so I just wanted to read this one exchange here between this federal agent who is named Lopez, and then Maduro's pilot is Villegas. So this was so they saw Maduro's plane take off somewhere, and Lopez, and this is in September, just very recently, and so Lopez texted him and said, "Where are you heading?" And Villegas said, "Who is this?" And Lopez pressed him about what they discussed in the Dominican Republic. Villegas grew combative and called Lopez a coward. He said, quote, "We Venezuelans are cut from a different cloth. The last thing we are is traitors," end quote. Lopez sent them a photo of them talking to each other on a red leather couch at the airplane hangar the previous year. Villegas asked him if he's crazy. He said he's a little crazy. And then 2 hours later, Lopez tried one last time, mentioning Villegas' 3 children by name and a better future, he said, that awaited them in the U.S. And he said that the window for a decision is closing, and then Villegas blocked his number. And then there was another post from Marshall Billingsley, who he was in the first Trump administration an envoy for arms control, which he was very bad at pursuing arms control. He did not do a good job in that role. But apparently he's close to the Venezuelan opposition, and he tweeted a picture of this pilot, the picture of him when he was sitting and talking to the U.S., to the feds, and then just another picture of him in his uniform. And apparently that got him heat in Venezuela, but he's come out publicly against this attempt to make him turn on Maduro. So it seems like they really tried to put the squeeze on this guy, but it didn't work out. And it goes to show, a lot of these efforts when it comes to Venezuela don't seem really that serious. It seems like they're just kind of trying things to see what'll happen. All right, so the next one here, U.S. to Lebanon. It's the last chance to disarm Hezbollah. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So U.S. envoy Tom Barrack is heading to Lebanon this week, and according to reports, he plans to tell officials that this will be the last time, and that Lebanon has one last chance to fully disarm Hezbollah and enter into direct negotiations with Israel. While this is in keeping with Barrack's rhetoric, the narrative has several obvious problems, including that the last time he was in Lebanon, which was just last week, he informed them that Israel had rejected a Lebanese proposal for direct negotiations on the grounds that they didn't want to commit to ending daily attacks on Lebanon. So Lebanon is trying to get Israel to stop attacking them and saying, then we'll address these demands that you're making of us, but please stop, violating the ceasefire deal. And of course, Barrack and the U.S. is just completely on Israel's side in this thing. And this is another ceasefire where the U.S. is the mediator, the so-called mediator, and the monitor of the ceasefire, in which Israel has just completely flouted. All right, so the next one here, Israeli forces kill 3 Palestinians in Jenin raid involving airstrikes. So this article is from Middle East Eye. Israel launched an airstrike in the West Bank for the first time in a few months. So Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinians on Tuesday during a raid on an occupied West Bank village that involved airstrikes. The attack took place in the early morning hours in the village of Kafr Qud, west of Jenin, when Israeli forces stormed the area and surrounded a house, according to local media reports. The raid sparked heavy exchanges of fire and aerial shelling. The Palestinian General Authority for Civil Affairs has identified the 3 men, and Israeli media reported that the army had cornered 3 men inside a cave in the village before snipers shot them, killing 2 and wounding the 3rd. Airstrikes were then carried out, killing the remaining man, and Israeli forces later seized at least 2 of the bodies. and the Israeli army claimed that the three men had been planning attacks in the area, but provided no further details. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said that forces would remain in the northern West Bank refugee camps, including Jenin, Tulkarm, and Nur Shams, which they have raided since January, leaving widespread destruction. So more escalations in the West Bank here. So the next one here, 2 civilians killed as gunmen attack bus in southwest Syria. So this one's from Jason again. Unidentified gunmen attacked a bus on the 110 highway in southwestern Syria, killing at least 2 civilians and wounding another 11. The bus was traveling from the Suwaida governorate to the capital of Damascus, and the attack took place near the Marjana station, just inside the Rif Dimashq governorate. Suwaida was the site of major violence in July, with the government forces participating in the summary execution of the Druze minority and closing all highways to and from the area for some time. The government declared the 110 highway safe and reopened it in late August. One of the Druze factions, the National Guard forces, issued a statement faulting the government for the attack, blaming it on criminal gangs affiliated with the national government, and no group has yet claimed credit for the attack. But the sectarian violence in Syria continues. So the next one here, Zelensky wants support to fight for 2 to 3 years. So Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Tuesday that he needs European financial support to fight Russia for another 2 or 3 years as the war continues to rage. Zelensky said, quote, "I emphasize this again to all European leaders. I told them that we are not going to fight for decades, but you must show that for some time you will be able to provide stable financial support to Ukraine. And that is why they have this program in mind, 2 to 3 years, end quote." And apparently that program that he's talking about is the EU plan to use frozen Russian money, frozen Russian central bank funds, assets to fund Ukraine. And we've already seen them give them loans using money that was made, the interest that was made on the Russian funds. And they're advancing plans to just take a lot of the Russian money and give it to Ukraine for over 2 to 3 years. So, and, also Zelensky said that either, if the war ends, that they're going to use the money for reconstruction, but if it continues, they're going to use it for weapons, to buy American weapons. And Zelensky also acknowledged on Tuesday that Russian troops have entered the city of Pokrovsk in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk Oblast, which Russian forces have been pushing towards for months. And so the war continues, heavy fighting every day. And it goes on. All right, so the next one here, Sudan. In Sudan, the RSF is massacring people fleeing El-Fasher. So very horrific videos and photos coming out of Sudan after the RSF took El-Fasher. I keep saying El-Fasher. I believe it is El-Fasher. So the moment, this is articles from the Middle East Eye, the moment the paramilitary rapid support forces, or the RSF, announced that it had stormed the city of El-Fasher on Sunday morning, it was clear that 260,000 Sudanese trapped in the city were in serious and immediate danger. Since Sudan's war began in April 2023, RSF fighters have been accused of widespread massacres and abuses, including genocide elsewhere in Darfur. Over the past 2 days, similar scenes have begun emerging from El-Fasher, a western Sudanese city that has been under siege for more than 500 days. Middle East Eye has reviewed dozens of video clips and images allegedly taken in El-Fasher since the RSF assault began. Some were published by the RSF itself. Others emerged on social media, particularly Sudanese Telegram groups. The footage depicts chaotic and bloody scenes captured by triumphant RSF fighters. Investigations suggest the videos are new. The Arabic dialect spoken is Sudanese, particularly Darfuri, and the fighters' dress is consistent with members of the RSF. Several videos and images were taken in locations that Middle East Eye has confirmed are locations within El-Fasher, or are consistent with topography around the city. Other footage is misleading. A photograph has been widely shared of a woman and 2 children hanging lifeless from a tree that is in fact at least 8 months old, and its location is uncertain. I actually did see that picture. And so in some of these videos, you see civilians attempting to flee. In some cases, RSF fighters were robbing civilians and then shot them afterwards. There's one where they're speaking to a wounded man and then they shoot and kill him. and others where they're standing around bodies. So again, just really horrific footage coming out of this part of Sudan after the RSF went in here. And the RSF is backed by the UAE. I remember the Biden administration, Tony Blinken, accused the RSF of genocide in Sudan. And it was just a few months after his State Department advanced a major arms sale to the UAE, which is a major backer of the RSF. All right, so the next one here, North Korea conducts second missile test as Trump tours Asia. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So North Korea claimed a successful test of a sea-to-surface cruise missile on Tuesday. The missile tests come as President Donald Trump is making stops in several Asian nations, including a planned visit to South Korea. So this is, again, at least the second missile test that they've done since he's been in the region. And you have Trump saying, he said something like, yeah, I'm ready to sit down with Kim, put out the word, I'm going to be in town. Let's have a sit down, was essentially what he said. And we'll see if that happens. I don't know. I'm kind of doubtful that's what's going to end up happening here. But there's going to be a lot of focus on China. Trump is going to meet with Xi Jinping while he's in South Korea. I believe that meeting is scheduled for Thursday. We'll see if it leads to any kind of diplomacy with North Korea. But that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from David Vine. Peace in Gaza depends on Palestinians' right to remain and return. One from Dan Steinbach. The post-Gaza rebalancing in the Middle East. One from Matthew Petty. Trump dares Congress to take its war powers seriously in Venezuela. One from George Beebe on Russia, Ukraine. The misdiagnosed patient is flatlining. And our spotlight from Gideon Levy. It's no longer possible to be a Palestinian in the West Bank. So please go check all that out. Let's hope the situation improves in Gaza. I mean, it's just, again, just as horrific as it's been, like seeing all those pictures and videos of just people being killed and children dead and wounded. It's just all starting over again and all being supported by the U.S., backed by Trump. Hopefully, somehow things cool down. But anyway, like, subscribe, comment, follow us on social media, all that stuff. Let's pray for peace in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, and all around the world. I will be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.